the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratNewsGlobal and welcome to our continuing special series on Afghanistan. I'm Surya Gangadharan, and this evening we're going to look at India's options in Afghanistan going forward. My guest is somebody who's appeared on our channel before, Mr. Shakti Sinha, formerly of the IAS. He was also a senior UN civil servant who worked in Afghanistan. He writes frequently on Afghanistan, and in that sense is ideal in our sense to get a perspective, a government perspective, or maybe not an official government perspective, nevertheless, a perspective on Afghanistan from an Indian point of view. Sir, you've written recently that India's interests in Afghanistan are limited. Can you explain?
You see, one is that Afghanistan is around us, of course, it's around us, but geographically, since we don't have direct access to it in one sense, and two, if you look at the politics of Afghanistan, to me, even that's more critical. The Taliban has always been focused only on Afghanistan. It does not export jihad, unlike Al-Qaeda and others. In fact, Taliban has not even made a statement on India generally, Kashmir specifically. So much so that when the Pakistani Foreign Minister, Qureshi, in August 2019, after the Kashmir developments, said this will jeopardize peace in Afghanistan, the Taliban were quick to condemn that statement and said no effort should be made to bring developments in Kashmir or India with Afghanistan. They have also said many times that they would like India to continue as a development partner. So I think in that sense, we tend to overplay this effect. Second is that if you look at historically, yes, Afghanistan is a country we should be friends with, but it is not in the sense of a transaction. Is that we help Afghanistan, Afghanistan helps us, and we gamble against Pakistan. No such thing has happened. 65 war, they were neutral. In the 71 Bangladesh war, with 10 million refugees in India, 3 million Bangladeshis killed by the Pakistani army, the world up in arms, public opinion, Afghanistan stayed neutral. In fact, in the UN Council, the General Assembly voting on ceasefire, third day into the war, 104 countries, including Afghanistan, voted for a ceasefire. In other words, had that been gone through, there would have been no Bangladesh and the killings would have continued. So since our relationship with Bangladesh is not security focused, that's what I felt that, don't think that this is the end of the world or that you could actually have done something. I don't think so India could have done anything more to change what has happened in Afghanistan. Really could have played a role in that. So I think in that sense, we do tend to get a bigger sense of what we are and a big sense of the loss that we have suffered.
Okay. So if our interests are limited, we've already invested $3 billion there with no guarantee there's going to be a return. Isn't it time then for us to step back from Afghanistan? I'm not saying walk away from Afghanistan. Step back from Afghanistan. Look elsewhere, maybe Africa, for mines,
Right.
rare earth mines. Put our money in there where you can get a return.
Right. Okay. Let me break up your question into two parts. The first part is the money that we spend. I think stability in Afghanistan is something we found is in our national interest for the simple reason an unstable Afghanistan, any unstable Afghanistan, allows Pakistan tremendous amount of deniability in sending jihadi terrorists across to India. Oh, this is ungovernable area. The borderlands are ungovernable. Nobody's in control. We don't know who the jihadis are, etc., etc. So that is something which is very important to us. Two, when you make roads for a society, when you make dams and when you make city lines, etc., you're generating goodwill, tremendous amount of goodwill. And if today the Taliban says, and they've been saying it in the past, that they look forward to India as a development partner, it does mean there's a very strong reservoir of goodwill for India and that no Afghan government would like to be seen. They would never say prioritize friendship with India over Pakistan because Pakistan is very vital for their existence. But I think the younger generation particularly, including those in the Taliban, see the value of good relations with India. And I hope I'm right going forward. The second part is Africa, absolutely. And I don't see the two as either or situation. We have extended lines of credit worth almost, I think, $30 billion to Africa for development again there. It may not help Indian exports or India directly, but you do this not just in a transactional sense, you do this in a larger strategic sense to be seen as a good player, a good friend, somebody who does not link development assistance with politics, because you are generating a larger goodwill in your game to be sitting on the Security Council and being seen as a major player in the world. So it's not an either situation. You must invest more in Africa. You must help development processes, but do not link it to very specific transactional gains for India. Then we would not be seen as a friend, but as a mercenary. So I would hope that that distinction we are able to make.
So are you
Again, it's
hinting
not
that?
suggesting that you dump money. I'm not suggesting we dump money. Also, sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
So are you hinting that India should have opened bridges with the Taliban much earlier?
I would say yes. Now, Taliban is not somebody I would invite to my house. I would like to be friends with. Let's be very clear. Taliban 100 or 200. Let's be very clear on that. And there's an ideology and attitude that we don't agree with. Having said that, we deal with all kinds of countries and leaders with much worse human rights records. We deal with them because it's necessary to deal with them. Now, as arguably 10, 12 years ago, different countries in the world, including the United States, United Kingdom, and others, started reaching out to the Taliban. President Karzai insisted on wanting to talk to the Taliban. Ghani, since becoming president, has been screaming from the rooftops, I want to talk to the Taliban. The world is talking to the Taliban, seeing it as a strong, credible political military force. Why should you be out on the loop taking a humanitarian stance or human rights stance that you don't take elsewhere? Would you like the Europeans and the Americans to comment on our human rights? Absolutely not. So much we dislike the Taliban's policies, etc. I think to see them as a valid player should have allowed us or asked us. And I'm not talking about 2 years ago, I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago, when they had emerged, but they were seen as one of the larger players, not as strong as the government, but an irritant, no doubt. And we should talk to all Afghans of all colors, all opinions. That doesn't mean they're our friends. That doesn't mean we prop them up. No, we don't prop them up, but we should engage with them. That's what my feeling is. We should have.
So there's a question here from Hari Gautam. He says, "What lies for the Northern Alliance ahead?" That group, of the Tajiks. I'm not sure it exists
Yes.
anymore. But
No, it does not.
what's your sense?
The Northern Alliance does not exist at all, Mr. Hari Gautam, unfortunately, or whichever way. One, the warlords are aging, they've got into business, they've lost touch with the younger generation. And the younger generation of Afghans, by and large, not just in the north but otherwise, have opted for the modern world. They are connected to the world, they're on their phones, internet, learning English, learning coding, wanting to go out. Lots of Afghans go out, work everywhere. So they are connected to the world, engaged to the world. There is nobody to pick up the gun anymore. There's nobody in Afghanistan to pick up the gun. Look at the leaders. Some have fled to Pakistan, ironically, seek Pakistan's blessings, including Masood's brothers and others, important
Yeah.
leaders, Muhakkik and others, including Hazara leaders. Others flew out to Turkey. Some have sneaked across the border to Tajikistan. Amra Saleh says he's in Panjshir. I believe him. But the fact is, there is Northern Alliance to pick up the gun and to pick up the fight. So I had written 2 months ago, when the Taliban comes to power, not if, when, there will be no civil war. There will be local problems here and there. There will be no civil war.
Okay. So there's another question from Lord Dakshinmurthy. Does this mean that Pakistan has lost influence in Afghanistan, given that the major players are engaging the Taliban directly?
No, I hope that comes out to be true. I hope that the Lord of the South and the North blesses that it happens. The fact is, Pakistan has been very tough on not allowing Taliban too much leverage in talking to the world. In fact, when Mullah Baradar in 2009 opened a channel with President Karzai, before the talks could pick up, Pakistan misled the USA about Mullah Baradar. They picked him up, they tortured him, kept him in detention, till in 2018 when talks actually started with US and Taliban, and USA realized they've taken for a ride. They insisted Mullah Baradar being released. The Taliban have Pakistan ISI people embedded in them. Please understand, there are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than Afghanistan. They're embedded in the ISI. And the leadership of Taliban is generally kept in custody or protective, let me say protection of the Pakistani army, and they have to travel, their families have to be, so basically they are held hostage. So Pakistan has been very carefully trying to ensure that the Taliban does not have agency. Let's see what happens now that the Taliban is sitting in Kabul. I hope you are right and that things change.
Given how Pakistan has treated their own leadership, um, would you presume that the Taliban leadership has long memories, perhaps even
Mhm.
ideas of revenge at some point? Because if you look at it, 40 years of
Yeah,
war in Afghanistan
I
alone,
know. Mhm.
Afghans have been ground down into terrorism,
Yes.
extremism, all kinds of things.
There is a very strong anti-Pakistan feeling all over Afghanistan, including the Pashtun areas. All surveys, and these are good surveys because they also show criticism of the government, happiness with something, have all shown that the Pakistan is the lowest loved country at 3% and 4% only loving it. But they realize that Pakistan is basically the gateway to the world. Their relatives across, their business interests there. So their ability really to act independently of Pakistan is still very limited. If in power, let us see where are they able to assert themselves. And many are grateful. To be fair, many of the Taliban are obviously grateful to Pakistan for military helping them and to enabling them to become a major player and being seen as a legitimate authority all over the world. So in that sense, it's a very complex relationship.
There's a question from Mr. Masan. Will India be looking for guarantees to commit development assistance, particularly on the periphery of a potential BRI arrangement Taliban make with China?
I don't think our development assistance will going to continue for the time being. I do not think so. I do not see government either embracing the Taliban very quickly or going the other extreme and trying to build an alternative to it. I don't see that happening. Government will obviously wait and watch, see how things develop. As in today, we don't even know if there is anybody in charge in Kabul today. We really don't know that. So you don't know the makeup of the government. You don't know their policies. You don't know what is going to happen. So obviously, I do not see anything happen. But the government, I think, is quite clear that relations with the people will continue. Medical, business, tourist visas will be given. The Afghan staff manning the embassy will continue to do so. Electronically, you can apply for visas, and people have been asking me from Kabul, and I've all told them, please apply electronically for the visas. But development assistance implies going through the government or operating there. I do not see. What India can do, as it did in the late 90s, is fund many UN and other agencies who are delivering humanitarian assistance on the ground. Otherwise, I don't see how we can be physically or involved in any kind of development assistance.
So what you're basically telling me is that while the lack of a land border with Afghanistan has its disadvantages, it also gives us enormous advantages in terms of the way we are perceived by the Taliban.
Absolutely. I think that's a very good point you're making. I mean, in the sense that all of us, oh, we don't have a land border. The map shows a land border and we wish we could access it. Yes, if you had access, you could have done other things. Definitely. There's no two opinions about it. It would have been an advantage in many senses. But as I hinted at the beginning, the fact you don't have a land border means you're relatively cushioned from these adverse developments. And you're not exposed to, I mean, the movement of jihadis as an example directly. Today, even if Pakistan says that jihadi is trained and the camp is in Afghanistan, you cannot reach Afghanistan from Afghanistan to India, but going to either Pakistan or Pakistani occupied territory. So Pakistan's culpability will be very much there. So that enables the world to understand our position on Pakistan and Pakistani based terrorism much, much better. So I wish we had a road, but not having a road is not that bad.
So there's a question from Raman Reddy on the Durand Line. What are your thoughts on that? I think there's the larger thing here is should India at some point make a statement, say, of support that to the Taliban on the issue of the Durand Line?
I think so. I think Mr. Reddy is onto something very interesting and very good. The fact is that the Durand Line was an agreement, first from the Afghans, no doubt, by Mortimer Durand and the British India Raj, for valid for 99 years. The Afghans took a stand in 47, which was wrong internationally, legally, that we had agreement with the British and Pakistan didn't exist, so give it back to us. No, Pakistan was a successor state as far as the western borders of India was concerned. But that line, when the agreement lapses in 1993 or something, either land goes back to Afghanistan or you have a fresh agreement. There has been no agreement. So in that sense, the lands of NWFP or Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and large parts of Balochistan, in that sense, are lands that do not legally belong to Pakistan. And there's no harm in raising the point because on legal grounds, Pakistan's case is very, very shaky.
Mm-hmm. But they've already put up a barrier, a fence across.
Yeah, they have. They have put up a barrier and fence so that innocents can't cross it. Only the jihadis, favored jihadis, can cross through the military checkpoints. Absolutely.
So, last question, sir. What would you recommend should be the ideal Indian policy at this point?
As I said, not one, of course, is wait and watch, but the wait and watch is a cliched word. It doesn't mean anything, right? So watch it very carefully. More importantly, you have to now work with countries like Iran and Russia, both of whom, unfortunately, in the last 3-4 years, for reason of geostrategy, both wanted to hurt the United States. And therefore, Iran gave it safe havens. Iran helped tactically by supplying small weapons, anti-tank missiles and anti-tank explosives, etc. Iran did that. And Russia legitimized it a lot. Samir Kabulov, who in 1996, when the Taliban came to Kabul, 15 days in the basement of the Russian embassy. Maybe it haunts him too much. So he did a lot to bring the world together into accepting the Taliban as a legitimate group. Okay, it is legitimate, but also delegitimizing the government of Ashraf Ghani. So one part I can understand, but they delegitimized the government of Ashraf Ghani, but not allowing them to participate in any peace conference organized in Moscow. That was very telling, I think. But now that the Americans have gone, and now that potentially jihadis from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, both of whom had a history of trouble making, and the tactical alliance with Iran, anti-America and anti-ISIS, will that unravel? Because those countries now are nervous. Iran is quiet. Russia's mass tanks in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and is carrying out a massive series of exercises tells you that they actually are wary of the situation. And while we are not resurrecting the northern lands and start fighting, we should not get into that game at all. But together we can then kind of put a closer watch and put pressure at different forums on different issues so that the situation in Afghan-held Afghanistan does not adversely affect any of our countries and is the interest of larger peace. That is very important, I think. But do not get into the game of fighting. Do not get into the game of creating a civil war. The blowback would not be good.
On that note, sir, thank you very much for that insight. And thank you for your views, sir. Good to have you on our studios. Thank you all for your comments and observations and your questions. Keep following us on Twitter, on social media, on our website, and do keep tracking our Afghanistan series. We'll have more coming in tomorrow and for the better part of this week. Thank you and good night.